Have you ever wondered if you truly know the person you sleep beside each night? What if everything you knew about them was a lie? Now, imagine a man who spent 15 years of his life with a woman he loved, only to discover that she was never really a woman at all. What would you do if you found out your wife was actually a man? For Richard, this wasn't just a hypothetical question. This was his reality. After years of what seemed like a perfect marriage, Richard found out that the woman he had fallen in love with, the woman who had given him 2 children and shared his life, was hiding the most shocking secret of all, a secret that would change everything. What happened when Richard discovered that his wife, Tanya, was born male? This is the chilling true crime story of betrayal, secrets, and the tragic consequences of a lie that lasted for over a decade. Richard and Tanya had the kind of relationship that most people envied. They were the perfect couple, living in the heart of Johannesburg, South Africa. Richard, a successful lawyer, and Tanya, a stay-at-home mother who managed their home and children, lived in a beautiful, quiet neighborhood, seemingly with everything they could ever need. They were the picture of suburban bliss. Their friends admired them, their children adored them, and Richard believed that their marriage was built on the most solid foundation of trust and love. They had met when Richard was still in university, a young law student at the time, and Tanya was a free-spirited woman who worked in marketing. They had bonded over a shared love of adventure and travel, and it wasn't long before they became inseparable. They married soon after graduation, and their lives seemed to fall into place with ease. Richard had always been the type of man who valued honesty, integrity, and family above all else, and Tanya had been the perfect partner for him. Years passed, and they had 2 children. A son and a daughter. Their marriage seemed idyllic, at least on the surface. Richard thought he had the perfect life, a beautiful wife, healthy children, a fulfilling career, and a home filled with love. They had worked hard together to build their family, and everything was falling into place. But behind closed doors, Tanya was hiding a secret so monumental, so life-altering, that it would shatter everything Richard thought he knew about her. Tanya's life was a carefully constructed lie, one she had been building for years. And it wasn't until one fateful evening, after 15 years of marriage, that the truth would finally come to light. It all began one evening in the fall of 2020. Richard had just returned from work, his briefcase in hand, ready to spend a quiet evening with his family. Tanya was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, just as she always did. But something was off. Richard couldn't put his finger on it, but he sensed it. There was a strange energy in the air, something he hadn't noticed before. Tanya's usual cheerfulness was replaced with a tense silence. They ate dinner together as a family, but the conversation was stilted. Tanya's mind seemed elsewhere. Richard, feeling uneasy, asked her if something was wrong. Tanya hesitated for a moment, then finally spoke, her voice shaky. "Richard," she began, her eyes welling up, "there's something I need to tell you. Something that I've been keeping from you for a long time. I can't hide it anymore." Richard, taken aback, leaned forward, sensing that whatever Tanya had to say was serious. She continued, her words stumbling over each other, revealing the unthinkable. "I'm not who you think I am," Tanya said softly. "I've been hiding something from you, for all these years." Richard listened in stunned silence as Tanya revealed her deepest secret, something that had been buried for years. Tanya explained that she was not born the woman Richard had known for over a decade. She was born male. Tanya had undergone gender reassignment surgery years before they met. She had transitioned to live as a woman, undergoing hormone therapy and surgeries to align her body with her gender identity. Richard, initially in disbelief, could not process what he was hearing. Tanya's words didn't make sense to him. He had married a woman, he had 2 children with her. How could she have hidden something like this for so long? Was she telling the truth? Tanya went on, explaining that she had kept her past a secret because she was terrified of being rejected. She never imagined Richard would be able to accept her if he knew the truth. "I never wanted to deceive you, Richard," Tanya pleaded. "I love you, and I wanted to be the woman you loved. I thought if I told you the truth, you'd leave me. I couldn't risk that. I never wanted to hurt you. Richard's world seemed to implode. He couldn't grasp the enormity of what Tanya was telling him. His mind raced with 1,000 questions. How had she kept this hidden for so long? Why had she lied? Was their entire marriage built on a lie? As Tanya explained further, Richard's mind swirled with confusion. He remembered their intimate moments, their children, the life they had shared. Could it all have been a lie? Had their relationship been based on deception? Tanya's explanation only raised more questions. She explained that she had always feared rejection, especially after transitioning, and had gone to great lengths to hide her past. She had kept her medical records private, maintained a perfect exterior, and even avoided regular checkups that could expose her secret. Richard's emotions shifted from disbelief to anger. He began questioning everything, his life with Tanya, their shared memories, and even their children. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and trapped. Tanya had kept something so significant from him, something that would have affected every aspect of their relationship. Richard, struggling with the weight of the truth, couldn't reconcile what he was hearing with the life he had known for 15 years. Richard's reaction to Tanya's revelation was filled with conflicting emotions. On the one hand, he loved her, but on the other hand, he felt like his entire world had been turned upside down. He had trusted Tanya implicitly, but now, he felt betrayed. The truth was too much for him to process, and the anger inside him began to fester. Every moment he had spent with her suddenly felt like a lie, and the thought of how long she had kept this secret gnawed at him. Richard wasn't a violent man by nature. He had always been calm, collected, and rational. But this truth, the betrayal, was too much for him to handle. His mind was clouded with rage, a rage that built up over the days that followed. Over the course of the following days, Richard became more withdrawn and distant. Tanya tried to explain herself, but the emotional toll on Richard was too much to bear. He began to withdraw from her, avoiding conversations and keeping to himself. Tanya, desperate for reassurance and forgiveness, reached out to him, but Richard's anger continued to simmer just beneath the surface. In the days that followed, Richard began digging through Tanya's past. He found records of her surgeries and hormone treatments, hidden deep within their home. He read through the documents with a sense of horror. Tanya had transitioned before they had met, but the realization that she had kept this secret for so long made him question everything. He found himself obsessing over the details, trying to understand how he could have missed the signs. The police were called in after Tanya's body was discovered. Richard, still in shock, was detained for questioning. He had killed his wife. He had shot her 3 times, driven by a wave of confusion, betrayal, and anger. Tanya had been shot in the chest, and the authorities quickly determined that it wasn't a case of self-defense. Richard had pulled the trigger in a fit of rage, unable to reconcile the truth of Tanya's past with the life they had built. As Richard sat in the interrogation room, his mind raced. He never meant to hurt her. He loved her, he thought he did. But the truth was too much for him to handle. His anger overwhelmed him, and in a moment of blind rage, he made the unthinkable decision to take her life. The investigation into Tanya's murder revealed a complex web of emotions, secrets, and deceit. Richard's emotional state was examined in detail, with psychologists weighing in on the toll the truth had taken on him. Was he responsible for his actions? Or was he a victim of circumstance, overwhelmed by a truth he couldn't handle? As Richard sat in the sterile, cold interrogation room, the reality of what he had done began to hit him. He could still hear Tanya's voice in his mind, pleading with him for forgiveness, explaining her secret in fragile whispers. But there was no going back now. The truth, in all its devastating clarity, had destroyed everything. The love he thought he had built his life around was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. The anger, the betrayal, it had clouded his judgment, and in that one fateful moment, Richard made the ultimate decision to take Tanya's life. The police had arrived at the scene shortly after Richard called 911. Tanya's body was found slumped against the living room wall, blood pooling beneath her. There were no signs of a struggle. It was clear that Richard had fired the shots in cold blood. He didn't deny it, he confessed immediately, his voice trembling as he relived the events of that night. The police were shocked by the admission, but the question on everyone's mind was, what drove Richard to such an extreme act? The authorities were quick to piece together the timeline of the crime. Richard had gone to work earlier in the day, seemingly unaware that his life would soon unravel. But the police couldn't ignore the fact that Richard had been harboring deep anger and confusion in the days leading up to the shooting. His friends, colleagues, and even family members started to come forward, offering conflicting views of the man they thought they knew. Some described Richard as a man of integrity, calm under pressure, while others hinted at a temper beneath the surface. But no one could have anticipated the violence that would follow. What had led Richard to take such drastic action? Was it purely the shock of discovering Tanya's secret, or was there something more buried beneath the surface of their marriage? And could Richard have been justified in his rage, or was he simply overwhelmed by a lie that had festered for years? As the investigation unfolded, the pressure on Richard intensified. The media quickly caught wind of the case, and the headlines were filled with shock and disbelief. The story of a husband killing his wife after discovering she was once a man captivated the public's imagination. Richard's emotional turmoil was on full display, and his confession didn't ease the judgment from the outside world. The love he once had for Tanya was now tainted by the revelation of her past. But was this a story of betrayal, or a tragedy driven by the overwhelming burden of hidden secrets? Richard's family and friends struggled to come to terms with what had happened. His parents, who had always been supportive of his marriage, were devastated by the news. They loved Tanya as a daughter, and now they had to face the reality of their son's actions. Richard's mother, in particular, was heartbroken. She had always known her son to be a kind, loving man, but now she had to come to grips with the fact that he had murdered his wife. Meanwhile, Tanya's family was in shock. Her parents had no idea about the secret their daughter had been keeping for so many years. They had always accepted Tanya as their daughter, never questioning her past. But now, they were left to pick up the pieces of a broken family, forced to confront a painful truth that had been hidden from them for years. Tanya's father, in particular, felt guilt-ridden. He had always been her protector, and now he felt responsible for not noticing the signs. As Richard sat in jail, awaiting his trial, his mind raced with questions. He had loved Tanya. He had built a life with her. But how could he ever forgive her for keeping such a monumental secret? Was their entire marriage based on a lie? Could he have ever truly loved her, knowing what he knew now? He tried to hold on to the memory of their happier days, their wedding, the birth of their children, their family vacations. But every memory was now tainted with the knowledge that Tanya had hidden her past from him. The guilt began to eat away at Richard, who couldn't escape the fact that his actions had led to her death. In his letters to his lawyer, Richard confessed that he had been consumed by rage in the moments before the shooting. He could still feel the weight of Tanya's confession, the way her words echoed in his mind. "I'm not who you think I am," she had said. And those words had shattered him in ways he couldn't have anticipated. The years of trust they had built, now gone in an instant. The legal process that followed was just as complex as the crime itself. Richard's defense team argued that he was suffering from extreme emotional distress when he shot Tanya. They claimed that the revelation of Tanya's secret, combined with Richard's own feelings of betrayal, had pushed him to the breaking point. Experts in psychology and emotional trauma were brought in to testify, explaining the deep psychological impact of living with such a secret and the shock that Richard must have felt upon learning the truth. But the prosecution painted a different picture. They argued that while Richard's emotional distress might explain his anger, it did not excuse his violent actions. They described the murder as premeditated, pointing to the fact that Richard had gone to the drawer, retrieved a gun, and deliberately shot Tanya 3 times. They painted a picture of a man who had made the decision to kill, even if his actions were driven by emotion. The case took another dramatic turn when Tanya's medical records were revealed in court. They confirmed that she had transitioned many years before meeting Richard, and had kept detailed records of her surgeries and hormone therapy. The records were crucial in understanding Tanya's past, but they also brought up uncomfortable questions. Why had she kept her past hidden for so long? And why hadn't she trusted Richard with the truth? As the trial proceeded, more details about Richard's state of mind during the weeks leading up to the shooting were uncovered. Friends, family, and colleagues testified about Richard's increasing mood swings and isolation. He had become withdrawn, angry, and consumed by the idea of Tanya's secret. He had even begun to make strange inquiries about gender identity and medical transition, further highlighting his growing obsession with the truth. Meanwhile, Tanya's close friends revealed their shock upon learning about her past. They had never suspected anything was amiss. They described her as a loving, caring person who had never hinted at any emotional struggles. For them, the discovery of Tanya's secret came as a complete shock, adding another layer of complexity to the case. The case became a media sensation, with people around the world debating Richard's guilt and Tanya's betrayal. Was Richard justified in his actions, or was he simply overwhelmed by a truth he couldn't accept? Could he have handled the situation differently? The courtroom drama played out in the public eye, with each new revelation adding more tension to an already fraught case. As Richard's trial neared its conclusion, the question of his fate hung in the air. Would he be found guilty of murder, or would he be granted leniency for the emotional trauma he had endured? The case was one of the most complex the South African court system had ever seen, and the nation watched with bated breath. The jury deliberated for days, weighing the evidence and testimony presented in court. Richard's defense of extreme emotional distress was compelling, but the prosecution's argument of premeditation was just as powerful. Finally, the jury reached a verdict: Richard was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison, but the emotional toll of the trial was far from over for Richard. The legal battle had torn apart Richard's life and Tanya's family. The truth, in the end, had proven to be far more destructive than anyone could have imagined. The secret that Tanya had carried for years had cost her everything: her life, her family, and her reputation. Richard's life was forever altered by the tragic events that unfolded in the courtroom. He would spend the next 25 years in prison, forced to live with the consequences of his actions. Tanya's death would always haunt him, a reminder of the emotional pain and betrayal he had felt in that moment of rage. The case of Richard and Tanya serves as a chilling reminder of how secrets can destroy lives and the consequences of lies, no matter how deep they run. Was Richard justified in his anger, or was he simply a victim of circumstance, overwhelmed by a truth he couldn't handle? This case is just one of many stories that explore the darkness that lies hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. Join us next time as we uncover another mystery that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, betrayal, and the human condition. Stay tuned for our next true crime investigation, where we uncover a case so shocking, it will leave you speechless. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified about our latest episodes.